Welcome home. We are WNST. Towson, Baltimore. Baltimore Positive. We are positively into another baseball week, but it is a special week. It is trading deadline week. Luke and I will be monitoring all of these things, and obviously any breaking news you'll find us at first on social media. We're doing our Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery. Our friends, give us these Gold Rush Sevens doublers to give away so that you can make some money. We had some winners that have Fadley's last week as well. Took a picture with one very lucky $20 winner last week, so we're appreciative of that. On the 13th, we're going to be at State Fair in Catonsville. All of it brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, keeping our water crystal clear and safe, well water, as well as my plumbing needs I had last week with Liberty Pure. And our friends at Jiffy Lube Multicare, keeping the cars oiled up, lubed up, ready to go even on 100-degree days. And Luke is doing these 100-degree days back and forth from Owings Mills down to Camden Yards. Orioles are in Miami where it's 100 degrees. I was there last week. Luke, on the baseball side, where there's going to be so much oxygen on the trading deadline, they still got to go out and play games, right? Miami's here, San Diego this week. Tell me how you're feeling about what you're seeing on the field, because clearly before the All-Star break, they had really scuffled. And you mentioned that last win against the Yankees being a little bit miraculous before the All-Star break. It was a good week to get away. I don't think there's any doubt about that. For all the guys that got away and didn't do anything, for Burns and for Westberg and the guys that played a little bit in the All-Star game, they got to hang out in Arlington. And they got off to a decent start in Arlington this week. And we're going to spend so much time talking trading deadline. Got to keep our eyes on the ball here going down to Miami this week.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, things were rough leading into the All-Star break, obviously, when you had two 5-game losing streaks in roughly a month's time, which is just so unlike this team. But I'll also remind, it's not as though they were awful over that last month. They were mediocre. If you have a mediocre stretch, you can overcome that. What you don't want to have is what the Yankees largely dealt with, which was just being playing bad for 3.5 weeks. And they're still trying to get off the mat, so to speak, from that. So I think if the Orioles, the break came at a perfect time, gave you a chance to rest up, gave you a chance to reset your rotation a little bit. Obviously, Corbin Burns, Grayson Rodriguez, I gave them a great chance to win over the weekend, and they took 2 out of 3. And I think when you look at the landscape of the rest of the American League, Yankees, we've talked about them. The Red Sox went to LA and got swept by the Dodgers. The Boston had been playing such good baseball going into the break. So maybe that's a team that didn't want the All-Star break to occur. And even Cleveland, who has been right there with the Orioles and the Yankees for the best record in the AL, they had a disappointing weekend. So, you're always trying to evaluate this in the short term while also keeping your eye on, to your point, the big picture. And this is an Orioles team that's still in great shape. They're going to make the playoffs regardless of what happens at the trade deadline. I feel confident in saying that. It would be an epic collapse at this point in time if they didn't make the playoffs at the very least. So, you're going to be playing October baseball. So it's a matter of playing good baseball to put yourself in position to, of course, win the division, of course, be in position to get that first round bye, which I still think is the advantage and something you'd rather have than not, even with the anecdotal evidence of the last couple of years, just understanding that's how baseball works sometimes. But in the meantime, you want to go to Miami and take advantage against a Marlins team that has been bad. This is the kind of series, and I saw some fans talking about this on social media, where 2 out of 3 at an absolute minimum, obviously, but this is the kind of series that you'd love to get a sweep. But at the same time, as I pointed out, when it's TBA after Albert Suarez, and you're trying to figure out exactly what the back half of your rotation is going to look like, it is a little bit of a challenge. So, they just need to take care of business, and that's what this team, last 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks aside, they've been able to do that. So I'm confident that they'll continue to do that. But it is definitely a weird week when you're talking about the trade deadline and maybe not guys on the major league roster being quite as concerned that they're going to be dealt. But at the same time, roles can change depending on who is acquired and who is brought in. So there's definitely some angst. There's always you can tell when it's trade deadline time because there is a little bit of tension that isn't normally there when you're talking about a long 6-month season. So be interesting to see how that plays out. But you said it. The Orioles just need to keep winning and got themselves off to a good start with the series win in Arlington.
I hate to say that they've had good fortune because of the pitching. I mean, it has not been good fortune on the health side of that. But across the rest of the roster, young players, all-star game, the fatigue factor that I think we saw setting in before the all-star break for a lot of these young guys. We talk about innings pitched for arms and, how far Crochet could make it this year if you were to get him. But then there's just the Adley Rutschmans and the Gunnar Hendersons and the Jordan Westbergs who are playing not through their first major league year, but playing through a summer where they're expected to win. They're a first place team. There's just a lot of hubbub around them now. They go to New York. There's people there. The All-Star game, they were a celebrated team. They added the starting battery, like the whole deal. The fortunes of all of this has changed, and the leadership part of the best players, Henderson, Rutschman, Westberg, for sake of argument, Santander, throw him in there, as to how that holds up for them when it did look a little heavy a couple of weeks ago. I mean, we started to see them struggle, and the Yankees have struggled big time. To your point, they're not on the 115-win pace anymore. They're just on maybe they'll only win 99 or 101. God forbid they only win 100 this year. It would be a backup from last year. But these are the dog days, and the All-Star game came and went. We had a Hall of Fame ceremony that I didn't even realize happened. Like literally, it just kind of, I saw the highlights on Monday morning of it. I guess maybe I wasn't a big enough Jim Leland or Todd Helton fan. I'm not sure. But from the baseball perspective of going out and doing this every single day, all summer long, when it gets hot out there, we're talking about trade deadlines and all of these other issues. I'm more concerned about the guys they actually have continuing to perform and not have that S word slump for the whole team. But seeing where Mullins and Hayes and some of these veteran players are, that they're going to get their sea legs under them halfway through a season that fans here expect to be playing late into October.
Yeah, and that's where I'd actually say, I mean, that's where last year's experiences can be positive for them. And when I say last year's experience, meaning how they had to play in September and how tight the race was with the Rays, and now you're anticipating a similar story with the Yankees and maybe the Red Sox before it's all said and done. Although certainly with their rough weekend at Dodger Stadium, takes some of the buzz away from them for the moment. But I think this is a team that's now been through that. I think a lot of what you just said, I think, was applicable last year. I think at the All-Star break last year, the Orioles were a big story because they were right there with the Rays for first place in the AL East and had played so well and had Rutschman and had Bautista in the All-Star game and had Yenyer Cano and Austin Hayes. So they had some of that last year. So I think the fact now that you're going through that again, the fact now that you know what August in a pennant race feels like, you know what September in a pennant race feels like, you know what October feels like, and getting swept and getting your feelings hurt after winning 101 games. So I think from that standpoint, they're better equipped now. Now, that doesn't mean that they're guaranteed of anything. And we've talked about this. They need more pitching. They need guys to stay healthy. They need their lineup to get a little more consistent than what it's been over the last 3 or 4 weeks, where the offense has fallen off a little bit. So, but these are guys at this point in time. I've talked a lot about the Cowsers and the Kerstads of this roster, wanting to see the next Jordan Westberg emerge, so to speak, meaning someone who's a consistent everyday player. But they've got a lot of guys who have maybe not the longest track record in the world, but guys that are starting to build some pretty impressive track records, starting with your two best players in Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman. So, I think it's a challenge, but no different than what any other team is going through. And like I said, even over this last month where they haven't played as well, it's not as though it's been terrible, right? It's not as though it's been worst team in baseball as the Yankees were for a 3-week stretch there record wise. So, it definitely lends itself to confidence that this team's going to play good baseball. And I think Mike Elias is going to make some reinforcements here that aren't necessarily going to be dramatic shifts. I'm not necessarily expecting dramatic moves to be made, but think they're going to find a couple moves that are going to help them and at least raise the floor, at least stabilize the back half of the rotation, hopefully add a couple more bullpen arms that you trust, and then you go from there. But you said it, and I've said it over and over that ultimately this team in October and their fortune is in October. I'm still betting much more heavily on the guys that are already on the roster making the biggest difference in either winning or losing than, I don't want to call it a pipe dream because I don't think it's impossible, but adding Tarek Skubal, for example, where, even if you do that, which would be an incredible acquisition, would be exciting as can be as trade deadline acquisitions go, you're still talking about someone who's still only going to take the ball once every fifth day, right? I mean, that's why baseball is I was talking about this with a friend recently, why I love baseball so much compared to other sports is you do have to wait your turn, right? I mean, Gunnar Henderson is one of 9 guys at bat every time through the order. It's not like LeBron James who can touch the ball every single time down the field. It's not like Lamar Jackson who has the ball every single play on offense. So, in baseball, that's where there is still that individual matchup and there is still that sense of wanting to have as balanced a lineup, as balanced a rotation, as balanced a bullpen as you can have, because you can't just rely on the same guys over and over and over. And that's where on the pitching side, they're trying to find more of that. But on the offensive side, that's where, you do have some guys that, I mean, 3-4 weeks ago, beginning of June, look where Santander's numbers were compared to where they are now, where he's right on Gunnar Henderson's heels for the team lead in home runs. I mean, who would have predicted that back on Memorial Day? So you never really know, but that's where you do have roster depth and you do have a lineup that is deeper than it was, certainly 2 or 3 years ago, stating the obvious, but you're going to have to rely on some of those guys. I mean, Adley Rutschman going into the All-Star break wasn't swinging the bat as well as he normally does. You don't panic over that. You have confidence he's going to turn that around, and he does and will and all of that. But you need guys to step up at different points in time, and that's where position player wise I have more confidence in them doing that. But yeah, the pitching side that continues to be much more of a question mark, and that's why there is so much oxygen and so much interest in what's going to happen here over the next week with the potential trades.
So when this trade happens, whatever the trade is, who can't be involved in your mind? Is Mayo off the list? Is Holiday? Where are we with feeling good about a trade that might include Kerstad, Stowers? We've talked so much about the veteran guys being a part of maybe an exit strategy for a team that, team loses a second baseman, they need a second baseman, right? Norby goes in that, whatever the team that you deal with needs. And we talk so much about Detroit and the White Sox, but is there, I would think Holiday's just not dealable. Like that's not going to happen no matter what, but is there anybody else?
I mean, it's so tough, Nestor, because I still look at this list of guys right now. I'm looking at the Athletics top 50 trade candidates, and they just basically put anyone. They have Vlad Jr. on there, for example, who I don't think the Blue Jays are going to deal, but the kind of guy who will at least be mentioned and has been mentioned from a speculation standpoint. And I just look at this list and I look at the top of the list and I say, how many of these guys are worthy of dealing those kind of prospects? We're not, and I'm not talking about Stowers. I'm not talking about, Norby, guys like that. Even Heston Kjerstad. I'm not, but you look at Jackson Holiday, who, look, this year's has been weird for him. There's no question about that. But I don't think anyone should be looking at it through a lens of 10 games of struggles, even immense struggles, dimming down the star that is his prospect status. And, I just don't know if there's anyone that's out there, if the Tigers said, hey, we'll give you Skubal for Jackson Holiday straight up. I mean, I don't know. But at the same time, Kobe Mayo is a pretty special hitting prospect. Sam Basayo is a really special catching prospect who, I think can stick at that position and can really change your dynamics with Adley Rutschman, and maybe have two catchers that you feel comfortable playing all the time rather than leaning on someone like James McCann who doesn't give you a whole lot with the bat. So, these are really, really good prospects. And I want to stress that. And that doesn't mean they're untouchable. And I'm not saying necessarily that anyone is truly undoubtedly untouchable, but it should take a lot to get guys like that. It should take a lot. And my point is, I just don't know how many guys are really truly available that warrant giving up those guys. So that's where I tend to focus more on the second tier guys, which, by the way, the Orioles' second tier prospects are most other teams' first tier prospects. That's what we're talking about here. Just because Connor Norby isn't Jackson Holiday doesn't mean that he's not well thought of in league circles, or just because Kyle Stowers has been stuck at Norfolk doesn't mean that he's not a major league quality outfielder. So now that doesn't mean that you're trading those two guys and getting Tarek Skubal. You're going to have to trade one of your top guys, or maybe two of your top guys to get someone like him if the Tigers are willing to do it. But it's just so difficult to answer it because so much of what I see on the trade market and so many of the names that are mentioned are just guys that, I don't know, like, how special are they, right? I mean, how much are they really moving the needle? I mean, Martinez for the Reds was mentioned over the weekend. The Orioles looking at some of the Reds pitchers. I mean, these are league average guys. They can help you. I'm not saying they can't help you, but are they guys that are putting you over the hump in October? Are they guys that are winning ALCS games or World Series games for you? I'm just not so sure about that. So, is Mike Elias truly swinging for the fences, or is this more improving around the margins? That's where I'm just, I'm conflicted. So I'm never going to sit here and say I'm never trading one of my best products no matter what, but it's got to be something that's worth trading. I mean, think about this. They got Corbin Burns, a full year of Corbin Burns, and they gave up Joey Ortiz, who is turning out to be a really good major league player, it looks like. But Joey Ortiz wasn't a top 15 or top 20 prospect in baseball like some of these other names I'm mentioning. So, to trade that much, you better be getting something really, really special in return. And that's where I look at the list that's out there, of guys that we think are getting traded, and I'm just not so sure. I mean, the White Sox want premier prospects for Garrett Crochet, and the upside and the talent is undeniable as far as the numbers he's put up, but this guy hadn't even started a major league game before this year. This is a guy who's had injuries, arm injuries, and he's already blown past his career high in innings. So how are you even going to manage him, let alone knowing and having confidence to trade these types of prospects to land him? So, it's tough for me. It's tough for me to answer that, Nestor, because I'm not sure how much true talent is going to be out there that even warrants trading those guys, let alone if I'm willing to do it. Like I said, Skubal, am I willing to trade a Kobe Mayo or a Basayo for Tarek Skubal? Probably, but I got to see what the whole deal looks like, and I need to see ultimately, are the Tigers even going to be reasonable? I came across a Tigers kind of one of these fan sites, so it wasn't like it wasn't like a established newspaper or anything like that. But I saw the deal that they proposed. It was Kobe Mayo, Heston Kjerstad, Samuel Basayo, and I think like Chase McDermott, and it was someone. I think Jordan Westberg was actually included in it. I'm just like, there's no way they're giving up that much for Tarek Skubal, who I really, really like, but they're not giving up that much to land that guy. So,
well,
is there a
the
match?
Twitter part
is there a
of trading
trade out there
deadline
to be
week
made?
is crazy. Just in a general sense, to think that we're giving up 5 prospects for a pick. I mean, it's fanboy alert. It's not reality. But the reality is, you and I could sit here and make proposed trades for Skubal all day long. They're going to include real players. This
Sure.
is they're not getting away with this and, sending Connor Norby in a bag of Delaware River Valley mud, right? Like, that's not going to happen.
No, of course not. And I wasn't implying that, and I'm not saying that you were suggesting that I was. Yeah, but that's what's tough about this. You might, and this is why so much of what you mentioned on Twitter and social media and fans trying to play GM. I mean, we all do it. Reporters are doing the same thing. Even those with the best intelligence, with access to general managers and executives around the league, it's not as though those executives are saying, "Oh yeah, this is going to be our proposal for this guy that we're trying to acquire." I mean, it's all poker, and so much of this is, who exactly is going to buy and sell. I mean, I think you could go back as we're talking on July 22nd, 23rd, 24th, a week out from the deadline now, or almost we're at a week, 8 days. How many guys over the years on July 22nd or 23rd or 24th or even on July 28th were said to have not been a trade candidate, guys that aren't going to be moved, and suddenly they are. I mean, Justin Verlander, remember the story for him being moved from the Tigers to the Astros? I mean, there was very much a sense of, okay, that's not going to happen, and then suddenly he's like, all right, let's do it, and the Astros got it done. And there's a major success story, but there's also the stories of guys that are talked about being traded and have no trade clauses. I mean, Adam Jones back in 2018, remember Dan Duquette was ready to trade Adam Jones before even talking to him about it, and that was a big reason why it didn't happen. It's like, look, man, I mean, I have 10-5 rights, and I've earned that as a long tenured player and in Major League Baseball. And Dan Duquette handled that poorly. If they had more dialogue with Adam ahead of time, I'm guessing he probably would have been amenable to going to the Phillies, because it wouldn't have been that far away. And again, that's an example. Max Scherzer's been talked about a lot, despite the Orioles, kind of, him getting his feelings hurt over the weekend. He had pitched pretty well before that, but there's been a lot of talk with him and his no trade and where the Rangers are right now. And, I mean, I know they're defending champs, but after losing 2 out of 3 of the Orioles, it's just like, are you guys really going to make a move here? Or is this kind of who you are at this point in time? Just because
we
you
better
won
figure
last
out
year
who you are in
doesn't.
the next 7 days, right? Like we've been talking about this for months. We're at nut cut time here this week for sure.
I agree, but there's still that indecisiveness that you see from teams. I mean, we see this. I mean, look at the Angels last year and how crazy that ended up being. Oh, look, we're going to make one last push for Shohei Ohtani, and maybe that will help us re-sign him and keep him. And well, they traded away what was left in their farm system. They stunk the rest of the year, and Ohtani left anyway. So, like, I mean, there's such an interesting range of outcomes. That's why I'm sure when people listen, they say, well, why aren't you being more specific? It's like, because I don't know, right? I mean, and the Orioles, more so than other teams around baseball in the Mike Elias era, have been very tight-lipped, very close to the vest in terms of even when they're going to call up a prospect. They've been very tight-lipped about that, to the point where sometimes it's been detrimental from a marketing standpoint, going back to Adley Rutschman a couple years ago, right? But from a baseball standpoint, there's a method to their madness in their minds for that. So it just makes it very difficult to project. And I mean, I'll say this much. They obviously love Jackson Holliday. They very much love Kobe Mayo. They really, really, really are intrigued by Basayo, despite the fact that he's young, but he's already a double-A buoy, right? And I think the skills are looking more and more like skills that this isn't going to be like a catcher by name only that moves to DH or first base right off the bat, like Carlos Delgado 30 years ago. But these are special players. And I think, again, to part with them, you have to make sure you're getting back special in return. And you can't force it. I mean, that's any good executive would tell you. You've got to, so many of these deals come down to timing, and so many of these deals just come down to just having the right fit. And that's why I've even said, don't dismiss the possibility of there being a trade partner out there where you actually swap some major league talent. I've thought that as a possibility, and I've used Mountcastle just as an example, who, by the way, has really struggled with the bat the last month. Again, example, not me sitting here banging the table to get rid of Ryan Mountcastle, but I've said it. Would there be a trade partner that you could add some pitching and they really need some offense, and you move a Ryan Mountcastle in the midst of a bigger deal, and then, oh yeah, that opens up a spot for Kobe Mayo to platoon with Ryan O'Hearn at first base, and suddenly you've kind of killed two birds with one stone there. You've opened up more of an opportunity for Mayo, and you've added some pitching in the process. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. But my whole point is, don't dismiss the possibility of a creative trade just because of, we've talked about this roster crunch, this pending roster crunch for what, a year and a half now. And Elias has done his darndest to hold on to as much as he can. I mean, he is, I don't want to say hoarded, but it's come close to hoarded these prospects. And I understand why, because of, you're still trying to think about the long term, but at some point in time, you do need to clear the deck a little bit. So is there a way to do that? Whether you're trading a Mountcastle, a Hayes, a Ramon Arias, and again, these aren't centerpieces to get studs in return, but they could be part of a bigger trade to, maybe align with another team, a nationally contender, who knows? So I don't know. I think there's a lot of ways to really spitball and be creative in terms of making a deal that doesn't just involve trading your top prospects and then realizing, oh, we traded this guy and yeah, we got a pitcher who's pretty good, but he's not Corbin Burns great. He's not, maybe he's as good as Grayson Rodriguez is right now, but may not have the same upside. So, it's tough and it's fun. It's exciting because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But again, this is an organization that is where they are right now because of how disciplined they were in terms of trying to draft and develop. Now, spending money at some point in time, spending more money is going to have to be a part of that equation. But until we know the realities of that, I think Mike Elias is probably going to tread very, very carefully because he said it all along. He said it last year. He said it this year. He says he's not doing his job if he is solely focused on 2024. You can do both. You can improve for 2024 while maintaining long-term health of your organization, and it's going to have to take something really special. That's why you've heard me say Scooble, Scooble, Scooble over and over and over, because I don't know if there's anyone else out there that they're willing to part with their absolute top guys to land. And even then, you're still talking about someone who has a little bit of an injury history. So, we'll see how it plays out. But I'm not sure that at the end of the day, there's truly going to be the kind of talent out there that's going to warrant the Orioles trading their elite of the elite prospects at the top of their system.
It's been a big week around here. Training camps going on. Luke's going to be out in Owings Mills, the Orioles in Miami, and then home against San Diego this week. And we'll be all eyes on the trading deadline as we get up on that next week as well. We have a big week around here. Lots of great guests coming on. We're taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road in August. Beginning on August 13th, we'll be with Angela Also Brooks, Prince George's County executive. She'll be joining us at State Fair. She's running for Senate. Larry Hogan has an invite to come on. We've obviously had massive movement at the top of the political spectrum. So I'm going to be talking some politics, some business, some local things, talking to some local folks around here the next couple of weeks as well. But trading deadline, football alive and well, great concerts in town this week. It's a fun week around here. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.